Hey guys, let's talk about some word problems. So I'm gonna do a few word problems that we're gonna translate kind of what's going on to come up with an equation in slope-intercept form. Now, in order to do this, word problems can be very difficult to figure out what pieces go where. So what I wrote is our slope-intercept form here, y equals mx plus b. And some of the keywords I'm gonna look for is anytime I see something described as the total, that's usually going to be what is your y. Anytime I see rate, per, increase, or decrease, that's typically going to talk about what number goes for your slope. And then finally, anytime it talks about the beginning or the start, that's typically going to be your b or your y-intercept. So as I read through this problem, I'm going to look for these buzzwords and underline them, and it might help me figure out maybe my equation or figure out, hey, what's my x or y variable? So you already read 13 books this school year. If you can read 3 books per month, write and graph a linear equation that represents the total books you have read based on the number of months that have passed. So I need to find a few things. I need to find my x and y variable, and I'm also going to come up with an equation. So one thing I see is I see this total. It says total books you have read. Now remember, y has to do with totals. So when I'm defining my variables, I'm going to say y is total books you have read. So all I have to figure out is what's the other variable here? What's the other thing they're talking about in this problem? And it says the total books you have read based on the number of months that have passed. And it also talks about books per month up here. So my x is going to be number of months that have passed. So I've defined my variables. The only thing I still need to do is I need to come up with my equation. So I did underline a buzzword here of per. It says if you can read 3 books per month. Now per is typically going to go with our slope. So our slope here, instead of m, let's put 3. And that's going to be positive 3, because as you read more books, or as the month passes, you read more books, your total is going to go up. It goes in a positive direction, so it's going to be positive 3. So I have my y equals 3x. I need to figure out my b. Now, by process of elimination, if I've used that 3 already, I should know that 3 is my b. Now, the other way you can think of that is you already read 13 books this school year. So I'm starting with 13 books read. So sometimes at night might not exactly say these words, but if you can kind of rephrase it using some of these words, that may help too. So I've started by reading 13 books already this school year. So that 13 is going to be my y-intercept. So I have y equals 3x plus 13. Now, what we're going to do is when we've written our equation, we need to graph it. So what I have on this back page, I have a graph piece here and I have a table. So again, our equation was y equals 3x plus 13, where remember x is the months and y is the books, or the total books I have read. So I got to just think of, what are some months that make sense? How many months do I want to pass? And just figure out a few data points here. So maybe I want to figure out what's happened after, let's do like 4 months, maybe, 6 months, and we can go even bigger, maybe like 14, who knows, somewhere in maybe 8. Doesn't really matter. Just a few months that makes sense. So 4 months seems reasonable, 6, 14, and 8. Now what you want to think about here is, what are some numbers that don't make sense? You don't want to pick numbers that don't make sense. Like if I said like 500, 500 months is a long, long, long time. I'm probably not really interested in figuring that out. 4 months passing, 6 months, 14 or 8 months, that seems a little bit more realistic. Anything like 100 or 200 months is a little bit too big. So now that I have some x values picked out, I need to figure out some y values as well. So I have this equation, and I have some x values. What we're going to do is we're just going to plug in here. So instead of having an x, we're going to take these values and plug in for x. So I'm going to take these numbers, plug into the parentheses here, which would be plugging in for x, and figure out the y value. So what that looks like on a calculator is I'm going to have 3 parentheses 4 parentheses plus 13. So I'm going to try and figure out what's going on here, which is 25. And then I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to figure out some of these other values. So 3 parentheses 6 plus 13. I got 31. And then I'm going to very quickly do the last two. So plugging those all in the calculator, I could figure out all of these different values here. So once I have these laid out, all I need to do is graph. Now this isn't going to look like your traditional graph. If you notice, all my x values are positive, all my y values are positive. So we're not going to have the traditional xy axis here. Instead, it makes much more sense to have x here and y there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have the positive x values and the positive y values. So I need to label my axes here. So I use x values of 4, 6, 14, and 8. So I'm going to label down here, and the lowest I need is a 4, the biggest I need to get is 14. Maybe I'll go by like, I don't know, 2s. So I'll do 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And I'll keep labeling following that pattern of going up by 2. All the way up to 28. And then I need to label my y-axis, which is the total books, as we've said. The lowest number I have on here is 25, but I need to get all the way up to 55. So instead of going by 2s, I might realize, I'm not going to get up to 55 if I go by 2s, because I only got to 28 here. Maybe I'll go by 5. So I'll do 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75. So it goes a little bit bigger than what I have on here, and that's totally okay. I just want to make sure everything's covered here. So to graph this, I'm just going to plot each of these points. So every row here is a point. So I need to plot the point 4, 25. So I'm going to go over my x to 4 and go up to my y of 25 and put a point. Go to my x of 6 and my y of 31, which 31 is not perfectly on here, but if you need to roughly estimate, that's fine. So a little bit above 30. 1455, so I'm going to go all the way down to 14, all the way up to 55, which is right here. And then 837, so there's 837 right here. Now since there's estimating, it might not fall in line perfectly, but it should be pretty close. So I'm going to take a straight edge here, I'm going to use my D, line them up, and draw a line. So there is my graph. A few follow-up questions here. First one, in a year, which is 12 months, how many books will you have read? So remember, we have this equation y equals 3x plus 13. Well, they gave us a number here in a year, which is 12 months. Remember, we defined months as x. So they're saying when x equals 12, how many books will you have read? Which that means they're asking about what is y. So if I know an x, I want to figure out y. Let's just plug in here and solve. So I have y equals 3 times 12 plus 13. There's 3 times 12 plus 13. You could do that in a calculator. I get 49. So 49 books is what I should expect after a year. And one more question here. How many months will it take for you to read 58 books. So they're asking about months, so we don't know X, and they tell us the books we've read is 58. So they're telling us Y is 58. What is X? So using the equation I had written up above, I'm going to plug in for Y. Let's solve for X. So I have 58 equals 3X plus 13. So got to solve for X, get X by itself, subtract 13, subtract 13. I get 45 equals 3X. Got to get X by itself, so divide by 3, divide by 3. X equals 15. So 15 months is how long it's going to take for me to read 58 books. That was word problems. Again, I advise you go slowly through these problems. And again, it might help to have written down these buzzwords as I reference.